Hello everyone, my name is Rina Wehbe and I'm here to present Personal Space in Play. This work is done in collaboration with Terrence Dixon, Anastasia Cumino, my former supervisor Leonard Naka, and my current supervisor Edward Lang. This work contributes an understanding of how to design for these multi-user, large, co-located touchscreen displays. It looks at physical and digital territoriality and how it affects human behavior based on our social constructs. As these displays got larger and larger and started to accommodate more people, there became a need for us to allow for distant reaching interactions. But extended arm metaphors, just like the one showed here by Doucette 2013, did not solve all of the problems that came with sharing a large display. This was clearly demonstrated in Peltonen et al.'s 2008 paper, It's Mine, Don't Touch, where a participant in the study reacted to another participant reaching for what they considered their digital object. Further research explores the combination of reaching tools and social constructs to better understand user behavior. The positioning of people in lineups, body language, body posture, has shown to demonstrate communication of acceptable boundaries in work by Azad et al. 2012. Work by Wallace shows that violations of zones, even entrance into the intimate zones, can be permitted in the contents of a shared task. However, the tasks used in these studies are generally media sorting or visual photo placement activities. But as games researchers, we may think of acceptable behavior that's permitted just because it's a game. As a result, the research question becomes, do these findings of territoriality from these media sorting tasks apply in game situations? And do the game's social collaborative environment change player behavior? So looking at the first question, do the findings of territoriality for media sorting and urban informatics tasks apply in game situations? To understand whether territoriality applied to games, we created our own game for the study. In order to play and win the game, players either had to kill the most enemies, or players won together with a combined score. This game is based loosely on the Space Invaders trope. In the game, players must use weapons to protect Earth from enemy invasion. The game was designed so that equal enemies came from either side of the display. We varied multiple conditions in the game. The first we varied was the fixed versus floating workspace. In the fixed space located on the top image, we had a contained workspace with a vertical split. Encroachments on the opposing player's side could only be done digitally with long-reach tools, or telepointer interactions. On the bottom two images, we see the floating workspace condition. The workspace is smaller and can be moved. Participants can use either digital reaching tools or physically drag their workspace over to an area. The neutral zone was constantly present. Our second question was, how does the game's social collaborative environment change player behavior? We tested this condition by adding a cooperative and a competitive play condition. In the cooperative condition, players had to save the Earth and had a combined score located on the Earth itself. In the competitive condition, players still had to defend the Earth together, but they also had individual scores so you can see who killed the most enemies. In summary, we provided a direct interaction or telepointer long-range interaction techniques in all conditions. We varied as a between subjects condition, fixed versus floating workspace, and as a within subjects condition, competitive versus cooperative score display. We collected data on the physical distance between players, their touch points on the display, their direct versus extended tool use, and which targets they chose to actually hit. Additionally, it was a mixed measure study, so we also collected data from player interviews individually, and we did a video coding of play sessions. We then compiled the data into these heat maps. You can see these heat maps compared here by cooperative and competitive condition, their digital location, their physical touch points on the display, and how far apart they were physically standing on the floor. Already we can see from these heat maps that having a fixed or a floated workspace did change the way that users engaged. Additionally, we can see that there are differences between the cooperative and competitive condition. For the full results of this compiled data, please see the full paper. When we spoke to users, we found out that they felt that physical interaction on the other person's side, moving your workspace over, was actually considered physically disruptive. Digital reaching is considered less disruptive. However, users reported that both of them had some level of disruption. Users made a lot of considerations before they chose to disrupt the other player. Since both physical and digital encroachments were considered disruptive, players considered things such as the cooperative or the competitive condition and what was considered polite or good table manners. The cooperative condition softened boundaries, making them more permeable. In the cooperative mode, players felt that it was more acceptable for them to cross boundaries into someone else's space, or for someone to come over to their space, because the intention was to help. This is reflected in the participant's quotes. So here this participant is saying that they felt that they had more access to the other person's side in the cooperative condition. Players still considered social constructs and diplomacy. Crossing over into another player's side in the competitive condition was considered more aggressive. If the other player was struggling with the game or unfamiliar with the controls, players often reported feeling like it was imbalanced, and there was this sense of diplomacy. If your opponent is not able to compete and it's not a fair competition, players were less likely to engage in competition. In the quote here, we see the player discussing how they would assess based on the individual that they were playing with. Players did not want to personally offend people by playing the game too aggressively. In this quote, the participant is describing how they would assess whether or not it would be okay to play aggressively. And how can we leverage these findings to design games? Well, we can leverage these findings by remembering to design with space. Space can be a communication tool. We can use it to teach players how to play the game, and we can also encourage or suggest actions. The variable boundaries that we give players will create this idea of a starting point, and players become attached to the starting point. Using this information, we can encourage pro-social or anti-social behaviors by varying these visible boundaries. A good example of how this can be applied can be found in Overcooked 2. In Overcooked 2, you have 2 or more players that have to prepare recipes. There are different tasks, such as chopping up the food, cooking the food, and sending it to the restaurant. In the first screen on the left, we see a delimitation of the 2 players, assigning them to tasks. So the player on the top raft must cut the food. The player on the bottom raft must cook and serve the food. Here we see that the game is teaching players how to strategize, how to split up these activities by forcing them into rules. As the game gets harder, these boundaries become less enforced by the game and are up to the player. The player can choose what strategy to apply in order to win the game, which means that players have to communicate with each other or fight with each other in order to decide who does what task. This increases the difficulty and adds challenge to this cooperative game. The game continues to challenge players by manipulating space, switching stations, and switching roles. Thank you for listening. You've just heard Personal Space and Play, Physical and Digital Boundaries and Large Display Cooperative Games. My name is Rina Wehbe. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out by email or Twitter, or even visit my website. For more information, please see the full paper.